afternoon. If you're on the East Coast and on the West Coast, good morning. This is Dan Lorman, and glad you joined us today for our BrightTALK session on addressing the cyber skills gap. Again, I'm Dan Lorman. I am the Chief Security Officer with Security Mentor, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel. We have a great group of experts with us today. I just want to briefly say my background. I started my career at the National Security Agency, was in England with Lockheed and Mantech, and Michigan government for 17 years, and I've been with Security Mentor now as the Chief Strategist and Chief Security Officer about 3.5 years. And we provide end-user security awareness training. We also work with executives around the world on hot topics, and certainly this topic of addressing the cyber skills gap is certainly right at the top of the list right now. We're going to be discussing that. We're glad that you've joined us. I want to hear your questions. So I want to encourage you to use the question tab in your BrightTALK connection, and also we're going to be taking some votes with the audience, some online polls, so please participate in those, and we add those in a few minutes. What I'd like to do, first of all, is just introduce our panelists and let them introduce their company and themselves, and start with Greg Reber, who is the CEO of Aztec. Greg?
Thank you, Dan. Sorry about that. As Dan mentioned, Greg Reber here, CEO of Aztec, 21-year-old security consulting firm based in San Francisco. And I've had this role since I started the company, so I've seen a lot of change. Somewhat like Dan, I began my career working for Defense Department in sensitive projects, where I learned how to keep secrets, and then started Aztec in '97, and been offering security architecture, security design services, and with an emphasis on application security, internet application security, for about the last 16 years. And we are the only company to offer breach guaranteed services in our niche. That was something we started last year and gotten some attention with that. So glad to be here. We've seen a lot of change in the last 20 years, so it's a very timely topic.
Well, thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. I'd also like to introduce Brett Fund, who is the CEO of SecureSet. Brett, welcome.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here. A little bit about my background. I've always had a deep personal interest in cybersecurity, tracing all the way back to high school, I'm sure for a lot of us. And that was bulletin board time, pre-internet, but have watched the security industry grow over that. Also have worked in a number of startups, as well as most recently been a professor at the University of Colorado Boulder, left there to start SecureSet as a way to address some of the challenges that we see in the cybersecurity industry with the talent crisis, and really bringing an immersive education approach to help be part of the solution that we're all working on.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I know we've got a couple questions already coming in asking about will people get copies of the slides. Just want to mention that, yes, these will be made available. They'll be, everyone who registers will be able to get copies of the whole broadcast, and you'll be able to see those after, I think, probably starting tomorrow with the presentation. I wanted to start off with a few minutes of some background on the topic before we get into some panel discussions. And I know one of the questions also came in, I said my volume is a little low, so I'm going to talk up a little louder. Hopefully you can hear okay. And this certainly is a huge issue. I just want to mention Forbes March 2017, Forbes magazine, said we have a global shortage of 2 million cybersecurity professionals by 2019. That was quoted from ISACA. You see these other numbers here that 200,000 cybersecurity-related roles, according to cybersecurity data tool CyberSeek, and employers are struggling to fill those positions. 40,000 jobs go unfilled in the United States, and I've seen numbers actually going much higher than this. If for every 10 cybersecurity job ads that appear on career site Indeed, only 7 people even click on one of those ads, let alone apply. So there's an overall shortage in the numbers, and again, those references are there. You can visit Forbes and learn more about some of those numbers. Also want to mention that smart cities, well, first of all, let me just talk about some of the levels of pay for these positions. In 2012, security analysts were making about $72,670, or excuse me, that's median salary is $86,170, and there are about 72,670 roles, related jobs available. And then 3 years later, that number had jumped to 88,880, with an average salary of about 90,120. Also seeing hot jobs in security management and CISO roles with pay. The article mentioned, Forbes mentioned up to $400,000 a year. I've actually seen for the top companies in America even up over $500,000 a year. Obviously most CISO roles probably not quite that high, more in the $100,000 to $200,000 range for smaller companies. But clearly those are all hot roles that are out there. Smart Cities World talked about the skills gap. They actually said it's not a gap, it's a chasm, and that there will be 9 million global public and private sector cybersecurity jobs by 2019. Only 4.5 million qualified people to do those jobs. So they specifically talked about energy. We're going to talk about different sectors during this discussion. Overall, just not enough technically educated people, and also not enough cyber awareness overall. So just, huge chasm there, huge challenge as we move forward. Then I also want to mention an article by InfoSecurity Magazine that estimates the current shortage is about 30,000 cybersecurity jobs in the U.S. And a couple of the issues that they listed, and we're going to talk about some of these and open this up to our panel here, but some of the concerns that they have are that the role descriptions are difficult. They're all over the map. Emphasis on excess skills, and what they really mean by that is too many things wanted. People who have these long lists of skills that people are looking for, whether that be years of experience and forensics and programming and on and on. These long lists of skills, kind of a one size fits all position, and that person just doesn't exist. And then also a strong emphasis on security and certifications and years of experience. Again, those are good things. Certainly those things are needed. At the same time, we have a challenge of maybe there aren't enough people who have those years of experience or don't have those certifications. So I want to stop right there and just go to our panelists, and maybe Greg, what are your thoughts overall about some of these numbers? Is this an accurate portrayal of the situation we have? Are these numbers low? Are they high? Are these the current issues that you're seeing?
Yes, they are, the short answer. One thing's kind of level set for this discussion is there's cybersecurity, and there's a larger set of information security, which cybersecurity is a part of. Information security, or cybersecurity, is the ones and zeros and access to that data, whether it's at rest or in transit. The information security is securing all information, and on the policy side also, do you have the right data classification, for example. And the skills gap that we're talking about today is information security wide, not just cybersecurity, but we'll focus in on that. But when you're talking about a CISO, that's usually more responsibility than just the cybersecurity aspect of it. So that being said, from what I've seen, I've seen a lot of articles on this too. Yes, these are the numbers, or it's similar. Gartner had something come out last year for just the U.S. There's 1 million, or by 2019, there'll be 1 million jobs unfilled in the security arena. So the numbers are, there's ranges of accuracy, but these are the magnitudes we're talking about.
Brad, any thoughts?
No, I wholeheartedly agree, and And I really appreciate Greg's description of and categorization of cybersecurity versus information security and the larger, broader problem that we have. And so numbers may look bleak, but I think what it also has done is rallied all of us to say, how do we work together to make sure that we're more secure in the future and put things in motion now that'll help us get there. So, and I think these conversations are very timely and part of the overall solution that we're working towards. So,
that's great. Well, I'm going to start the first poll, so get some audience participation here. I'm going to start, and I'm going to give about 5 minutes for this. And the questions are going to be, I'm going to start the voting here. Really, are you finding it difficult to find qualified cybersecurity professionals? And really give you 3 options. 1, yes, most of the time I'm having difficulty. Yes, often I'm having issues. Or our company's having issues, we're having issues, whoever you're including in that, the industry you're in. Sometimes, but not very much, not very often. And then that's the last area is not very often. So yes, most of the time, yes, often, sometimes, but not much, different than other professions, and then not very often. So we'll leave that running for about 5 minutes, and we'll come back and we'll look at those results in a bit. But I encourage everyone who's on live here to go ahead and vote, and we'd love to hear what your views are on that. Now that we've had a little bit of an intro discussion, I want to really move back to Greg, and start discussing this issue about how we're characterizing the problem and how we can address the problem. So Greg, maybe just a few more thoughts on how bad the problem is, within different industries. Can you maybe give us a little bit more detail on that? Is this something that we're seeing across the entire country? Is it worse in banking? Is it worse in government? What's your sense? What numbers do you see as far as the skills gap? Is it different in different industries?
Sure. Most of our clients are in financial services, and that comparison that I made between cybersecurity and information security applies in that the information security folks that are looking for, what are the regulatory pressures for my specific industry, that's in there. The cybersecurity skills gap or skills set required really has a lot of overlap from industry to industry. If you're accessing data and it has some sensitivity to it, or if you're storing data has some sensitivity to it, it's sensitive whether it's banking or insurance or even in educational. They're really, really getting better in the universities. The one of the questions that came in here is what's the opinion? I hope you don't mind.
Yes, fine. Go just we're going to also take them again more at the end, but feel free. Go ahead.
Sure. One of the questions applies to this, the question you just asked me, and that is, what is your opinion of the cybersecurity centers of excellence programs for universities? I'm pretty familiar with one of them, and that's the University of Maryland, where I went, and they know what they're doing. And they are doing, there's a lot of combination of curriculum and hands-on, which is what's needed. So my opinion of the one that I know the most about is pretty good. But undergraduate programs are lacking. They're not really, the higher education programs are evolving too slowly in the undergrad space. And I think that needs to change, and I think it is changing. We're seeing more and more, especially in application security, more and more security of secure coding techniques in computer science departments. But it's evolving too slowly to actually keep up with the increase in demand. My big thing is apprenticeships work in this arena. Having someone who really has been in the arena for a while, and using internal training programs once someone has the foundational networking experience or knowledge, that really works. And we've seen it work also in the secure coding to address, because most successful breaches are now through internet applications, not network. That inflection point happened, I think, 2 years ago. So I want to make sure that I answered your question there. Does that cover that?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks. And, Brad, any comments on that? And then you would also talk about some solutions that you see are working. Where do you see the biggest needs, and how do you think they're being addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to take a step back slightly, I think we've seen the numbers. The numbers are real. There's a big problem. What's embedded in those numbers is that it captures both entry-level jobs as well as, seasoned, tenured security professionals, right? I would agree, and I concur that I think a lot of the early talent is where we're seeing the most demand, and it's because I think that in the past people have been in IT roles and then found their way to security, whereas now in the last 5 years we've really grown the demand for those entry-level positions, and that's created a problem that traditional education hasn't been able to meet that demand, like Greg was talking about, and then, as he also mentioned, some of that's evolving too slow. Some of the solutions that I've seen, I agree with a lot of the apprenticeship type approach. The immersive approach is also really important, and that's part of what we're doing and trying to say. It's not about learning these things; it's about getting hands-on experience. And if we can give that experience within a shorter time frame, so that people can enter these entry-level positions, it doesn't make them professionals; it makes them entry-level professionals, so that they can continue to grow and develop their career as they go on. But in order to meet those numbers and to help fill those gaps, we're going to have more hands-on, more immersive approaches in order to get the pool that we need to start in the career so that they can continue to grow and develop and meet the demands of tomorrow over time. So there's some really interesting models. That I have to talk more about, but go ahead, Greg.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but Dan, is it okay if I build upon what Brett just said for a second?
Sure, feel free. Jump in, please.
Well, one of the questions on the current slide is words of advice to someone who wants to get into a cyber career. It is, for me, learning the fundamentals of IT and internetworking, how the ones and zeros get moved around and stored. You got to do that and then grow security knowledge from there. But one of the things I've seen over and over and over, because there's such high demand, is my advice would be for people who are getting into it, who've already gotten into it, to stay in the job long enough to actually learn something and avoid the temptation to job hop for higher pay as soon as that opportunity comes up. Because that's going to make you more likely to succeed in the long term. But right now, the pay is just, driving a lot of people. Okay, I've been here for 6 to 12 months, and then I'm going to leave. And then they get into those jobs they're not ready for yet, but they're making a lot of money, and they fail.
Yeah, Greg, I can totally agree with you on that. Point. I think it's really important. I just want to say for everyone in the audience, please vote. I'm going to stop the voting in about 30 seconds, so we'll come to the poll in a moment. I totally agree with you, Greg. I think that I mentor several people in the cybersecurity industry, different industries, and I see that a lot of temptation 6 months in, a year in, certainly even 18 months in, the tendency to want to job hop, to take a quick jump. I totally agree with you. I just want to add also that here in Michigan there are quite a few centers of excellence, NSA, DHS centers of excellence. I think that is a great solution for young people. I get requests all the time to talk about those. There's 5 universities right here in Michigan that have centers of excellence. They're great programs. I also think there's a big shortage in government. A lot of times in government, the pay gap is even greater, especially when you add in stock options and other things. So it can be hard. You guys talked about banking and finance, but some small businesses, mid-sized businesses, a lot of times can't pay as much as the finance sector, the banking sector. So I know government's losing a lot of really good talent to the private sector. Well, I'm going to stop the voting. We're going to go on another question here in a moment, but get you those results here. It looks like about 28% of the people who voted said most of the time. 41% said yes often. So, right about 69% of you are having issues in finding qualified cybersecurity professionals. 26% are saying sometimes. Looks like 3% said not very often. So, vast majority of you are having issues, like around 70% are having significant issues, and we appreciate that. We'll do another poll in a few minutes. Let me jump over to Brett. Any comments on these results? Are they surprising to you, or anything else you want to add?
Yeah, no, not at all. And I think it just, again, what we see there is just a pain that a lot of employers feel. As part of the reason why we set out to start what we did was because we spoke with a lot of employers who said, I get employees in, then I train them, and then once I train them, then they leave, kind of like Greg talked about, somewhere else, and that is really hard for them. And so getting that entry-level talent to a point where they can start the job running day one is important, so that employers can actually utilize the employee, help develop the employee, and then, as Greg mentioned, so we could really help keep them in the profession, because that's what we need, so we can really grow and develop this workforce over the long term. So it is a problem. Not surprising, it's a problem. The pain we all feel, and there's things that we can do to try to make tomorrow better.
So, Brett, one follow-up on that. I mean, I hear that a lot as well. If we certify our people, give them CISSPs or other types of, certifications or training, they're going to leave. And I've also heard the comeback, kind of a funny comeback, from people, well, just think about if you don't train them, what do you got? You've got untrained people who don't necessarily know how to keep up in the fast-moving workforce, and the threats are evolving. The whole world we live in around technology is evolving rapidly. So what are your thoughts about cross-training or bringing in people from other parts of the organization or maybe other parts of technology, maybe a system administrator, other people who are interested, who have a technology background, and bringing them into information security and cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And it's interesting. So we run a 5-month immersive program that helps educate individuals looking to get into the career. And I would say most of the backgrounds in our core technical program are system administrators, network administrators. We have some IT help desk programmers, all looking to take the relevant skills they've gained in their IT work so far and then, reposition themselves as a security professional. So it's wonderful that they have that drive and that they can do that. We've also worked with some large companies that are saying, hey, we've already got this crop of IT folks in our company. How do we keep them inside of our company and redo that? And so we've been trying to help them think those problems as well. But I think those are going to be very beneficial for our company, because a lot of employees, as long as they're happy with where they're working, they want to stay. They just want a new challenge in their career, and security can really provide that for them. But it does take retooling, retraining, and giving them some additional hands-on skills so that they can be productive for that employer.
Sounds great. Hey, Greg, I'm going to go back to you with another question here in a minute, but I want to start another poll, and I'm going to leave this running 5 to 6 minutes out there so everyone out in the audience can vote. This is the second poll on what are the hardest positions to fill in security. And you may, when you see this, and we're going to go live with this, I'm only going to let you vote once, so I know that you may say, some of you may be tempted to vote for all of these. But what's your biggest pain point? Is it executive positions? Is it managers with cyber experience? Is it hands-on security specialists with experience? Or is it getting those new college grads with the right technical degrees? Maybe there's another category, but these are 4 we selected. And if you could just vote one time, please, for one of those, we'll see what the highest pain points are there. But back over to you, Greg. I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about what strategies you see, are working for employers, not just employees, but employers, people trying to hire out there. Is it mainly a money issue? Is it a career issue? Is it a culture issue? I want to join a company where I feel like I can really feel at home. What are the biggest hurdles, if you will, for companies when they're trying to attract and hire cybersecurity professionals?
Well, it's of those options you offered, it's all of the above and a few more. I already mentioned the job hopping thing, because when that happens, and it happens in any industry where there's high demand for talent, and so salaries are going up because a lot of companies will just compete on money. The younger folks, I'm pretty old now, but the younger folks aren't always just after the bucks, though. It's a quality of life thing that we didn't really see before. There's a lot more remote working environments, and if a company is not willing to be flexible on that, they might miss out on a few very talented people, and these are talented people who have a lot of options. By some reports, there's actually negative unemployment in information security field, but it's at least close to zero, and a lot of people just aren't looking. So trying to find, like the one stat that you had about for a job opening, they might not get anybody to even apply for it. Another thing that's, the phenomena that we've seen is the resume buzzword bingo for doing keyword searches. So there are some folks who are looking who'll put everything on their resume. And it turns out they're actually not expert in everything. They're maybe expert in one or two of the systems. And in the technology field, it's system knowledge and hands-on experience that might make them valuable. But if there's the resume search, a lot of recruiters who don't really know this field will just look for keyword searches in resumes, and people know how to play that game. So then they get unqualified candidates. The certification, so that's a filter, but not a true indicator necessarily of a skill set. Like CISSP, it tells you about, I think it's 10 different domains of security to a certain level of depth, but it's not going to make you an Imperva expert, or it's not going to test your knowledge on WebSense. So some of these point solutions that you really need expertise to make them work well. The years of experience should be highly weighted, but you got to have somebody interviewing that can go down to the depths of what did you do during those years of experience. That's quite important. A lot of folks came up through IT and say, congratulations, you're now the security person too, as opposed to hiring a security person. So it's a separate skill set to some degree. Security is a mindset, not just a skill set. And the security generalists that a lot of people need for architecture positions that have a deep enough tech experience are extremely hard to find. I mean, extremely hard to find. And
so
then
let me ask you about that real quick, and then I want to jump over to Brett because I think it was to jump in too. But you mentioned also with resumes, people put things on their resume. I mean, how big of an issue is that? I mean, if you find out, is that something you're seeing where people, like I said, they put everything on there, and then you find out that they really don't know half of it or more? Isn't there a trust issue there as well? I mean, how much is that?
Yes.
How big of a problem is that? Where people are just either copying somebody else's resume. I mean, I'm not saying plagiarism, but I mean, I've seen that as well. But just basically putting buzzwords in there, but they don't really have those skills. Is that a huge problem?
It's not a huge problem relative to some of the other things I mentioned, but it's a problem. It's in this country, it's not as big a problem as in some other countries that are trying to staff up in maybe cheaper labor markets. But it's an issue, and we've run across it in our company. People showing up for interviews that you start talking about things on their resume and they can't. And okay, that's a short interview.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. Hey, Brett, any comments on that or tips that you can offer to help people through that process?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree a lot with what Greg was saying, and I think part of it comes from, people think they can, go do a few things or go get a certification, and then that makes them an expert in a domain. And like Greg says, it's hard to substitute real hands-on experience, and so and that years of experience is also extremely valuable for certain positions. And so I think it's important for people to show the passion. I would say what I usually tell people who are looking to get into the security industry, obviously beyond the educational side, is to network and to find mentors. And you talk about being a mentor as well, and it's so important for people to understand what the job is and to help guide them in their preparation to take on those jobs. I think just a quick comment on types of positions. I think some of those entry-level positions, analysts specifically, sometimes it's harder to find some of those, especially because of the quantity needed, depending on the type of roles. I think some of the other problems that I've seen, and I would love to hear both of your opinions on this as well, is different employers will use the same term, like an analyst, but really the jobs are totally different. And it goes back to the point that was made on an earlier slide saying excessive skills. And I think that has to do with, for some employers, they require more for positions because they've got less of a workforce that they're dealing with. And other employers just want that individual to do one sort of thing, and it's more of a low-level position than a more generalist position. And so that has created its own problems. So people apply for positions that they may be qualified on one side for one company in a more lower-level position, but it's the same title in a different company, and they're just wildly unprepared for that type of a role. So it adds to the confusion of the marketplace, I think.
I would agree. I'm gonna close this voting here in a second. So you got about 30 seconds. I'm gonna close the voting on this hardest to fill positions. I would just add to that, Brett, that in my years in government, we would have that. We'd have analysts and we'd have specialists, and you kind of work your way up through almost like the GSA pay scale in the federal government. And there'd be oftentimes different levels, analyst 11, analyst 12, specialist 13, specialist 14, specialist 15, so different levels, and then they condense them and they roll them all into one just to give flexibility. I've seen the pendulum go back and forth, and not just in cybersecurity, but in other technology areas as well. And a lot of times, we see this. It's a challenge because years of experience is certainly what everyone wants, and we're seeing here in these poll results as I stop them here now, hands-on security specialists with experience. So clearly, what we're seeing in the market, in my view, is a need for people with hands-on experience. As you mentioned, WebSense was mentioned, other different things are mentioned, Microsoft, Google Cloud, whatever it might be that people are looking for. At the same time, as we see, I use a lot of sports analogies, sometimes rookies come in and, you're rookie of the year, and it doesn't happen that often, but you really have that passion. You really are very, very talented, very good as a quote-unquote hacker, white hat hacker, maybe a pen tester, whatever. Somebody comes in, they may not have, 5 years experience, but they're really good right out of the gate. And so you have kind of a, what we just saw in the Super Bowl, right? A backup quarterback who ends up winning MVP. So, it's hard, to put one size fits all. But I do think I see that exact thing is that people call it, I need a specialist, I need an analyst, I need a specialist with 10 years experience, and that's the way they show up in the position description. Doesn't necessarily tell you how good of a pen tester that is or that kind of a thing. Greg, any comments on that before we go on to the next question?
No, I think you summed that up.
Okay, great. I know we're going to go to the audience here in about 2 minutes. We got some great questions coming in from the audience. I just want to do one more, and then we're going to move to the audience questions, so keep them coming in. We got about 25 minutes left here, and so appreciate your questions. Thank you for sending them. Keep them coming. I just want to wrap up, Greg, and just say, how important is in this whole area of security and cybersecurity positions, I hear a lot of people talk about, understanding the business, not just being a technical geek, having how many positions really require knowledge of the business, or people coming maybe, and also an opportunity to bring in business analysts, business experts who understand the processes, understand how a business runs, maybe understand the supply chain, and now maybe can take those skill sets into cybersecurity and or cybersecurity people, getting involved more with hands-on in the business. Any thoughts on that kind of business skills and someone who can really kind of maybe translate between cybersecurity and the business?
Yes, Dan, I have a lot of thoughts about that, but we're actually working with a pretty well-known financial services client out of New York who right now is struggling to find that balance between meeting security requirements that they've set internally plus regulatory-wise, and balancing that with the business need. Because every security person will tell you that the best security is air gap, right? Unplug everything. But business stops. So the other end of that extreme is the business runs everything and runs roughshod over security, and then the company's at risk. So what we're seeing is this is really a top-down kind of a management issue. So the boards and the C-level folks who have to put the job descriptions together for a chief information security officer, they need to know what their risk appetite or the balance between business risk and cyber risk will be. And then they need to have that kind of CISO that's going to be successful in that environment. So having that, that balance is much more attainable when you have people who understand the business and understand security in the top security spot. I hope that answers your question.
That was great. That's fantastic. Thanks. And I'm gonna go to Brett and some questions from the audience here in a second. I just want to wrap up. We did close the voting. 62% said that they felt like hands-on security specialists with experience are the hardest. 24% said managers with cyber experience, only 8% executive leaders, and 4% said new college grads with technical degrees, which interesting because I've seen that number be higher in other polls. That's just maybe our audience. I know that you vote once. I'm sure some of you might have voted for that, and maybe security specialists with years of experience. So I just was trying to see where your biggest pain points are. So it looks like that technical degree, technical experience of specialists are the number one area. We have a ton of great questions. I'm going to start firing these off, and I'm going to just kind of divvy these out to Brett and Greg, our experts. And I want to start right, I would start with this one. Why focus just on the United States? What about worldwide? And any questions, Brett, or you have any comments about the global cybersecurity picture and how that might relate to the U.S. or how we fit into the global scene?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a global problem, and because we're all interconnected, we really do have a global economy that we do need to be concerned about it on an international level. I think oftentimes when you see a focus on more national problems, it centers around some of the national security issues, right? And we want to make sure that our companies are safe and our governments are set up to also reinforce those companies to make sure they're safe. But a lot of the large companies are obviously international companies, and so taking that to the international scale is something we've got to do. I think we all know sort of the threat actors that are out there, and so nation states as being one of those is just that's where the national conversation comes into play. But obviously on the criminal organization side, that then becomes an international conflict that I think we really do need to rally together and say, how do we stop and reduce cybercrime internationally by joining together, whether that's sharing intelligence, whether that's making sure we do best practices in education, but we've got to solve it on a more international scale.
Fantastic.
Hey, Dan, can I just, Dan, I'm sorry to jump over you, but as an example of what Brett just said, in May of this year, the European GDPR, General Data Protection Requirements, comes into effect, May 25th, and that is much more stringent than anything any U.S. company has ever had to adhere to. And there are prescriptive requirements for security coming with that. So that's a global thing, right? Any company wants to do business with an EU client or have their information will have to adhere to those requirements, and they're not. That's a step function. So that just as an example of what Brett was saying, to work together is important.
Fantastic. So next question, I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because we got like, I guess, around 20 questions coming in now. So it's great. Thank you, audience. Keep them coming in. Are there security boot camps, like coding boot camps, that can help with critical skills in a condensed way? What do you recommend? So I think there's another question in here about how do you get into the field? Are there ways that people can get in to kind of do a security boot camp? And any recommendations there? Go ahead and start with that one, Greg, and then I'll jump over to Brett on that.
Sure. And as they mentioned, there are secure coding boot camps for most languages now. There are also pretty intense boot camps for network and application penetration testing, and that's highly recommended because internal folks, even if they're if you're going to outsource pen testing, you outsource pen testing, but you have to have people internal to be able to do that too. And so that's another area of boot camp for specifics. And then there are, of course, all of the most of the security product folks who are kind of leading the way in their niches, and I already mentioned Imperva for web application firewalls. There's also Checkmarks and others, offer the same kind of thing for their product. And if there are companies that are considering them, then they should also take part in that.
Where would you recommend they go if they want to do this? I mean, do they just Google Cyber Boot Camp, or I mean, there may be a couple practical examples. I know both your companies offer some training, but anything you'd recommend? Just you want to, you could be selfless here.
Well, the certified I'm sorry. I thought you were asking me. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Jump in.
Well, I was just going to mention the Certified Ethical Hacker Certification, CEH. That's a very good start for that kind of penetration testing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, so obviously we've seen a lot of the code camp model, which is that boot camp for learning how to program, and I think so SecureSet is set up in a similar model. We call it immersive education, and it's a 5-month program or a 3-month program to really get them the skills and the hands-on experience they need to be able to be proficient starting out their career. So definitely models exist. We have some others who have followed suit from us. We started in 2014. I think Evolve started in 2016, and a couple others we've seen pop up, which are great. They also do similar things. So I would say anybody who's interested in taking that model as an entry into their career, just go look, talk to students who have graduated from those programs, see what their experience is. And then I'd also talk to employers who have hired those students to see what their recommendations are. I mean, I know for us, we do a lot for making sure that our employers are happy on the other side. So definitely a model that I think will help complement what's happening in the universities and just get more people ready and able to help out with these careers.
Great, thank you. I'll take one of these myself, and then I'll hand it back over to another one for Greg. One question's come in is, what skills are needed to be a successful CISO, particularly for someone with a risk background who wants to transition? There's a lot you could say there. Clearly working up with security experience, there's kind of two schools of thought there. Understanding the business, having security leadership ability. I mean, I think obviously CISO can be very different in different environments. For a small to mid-size company, it's very different than it might be for a large enterprise like a bank where state of Michigan, I was CSO, I had 30-some staff under me, had a incident response capability, had a variety of different functions, everything from training or the enterprise in end-user security awareness training all the way to very technical security controls around enterprise databases and data centers and really overseeing all of the security for the state. So it really kind of depends on what role you're talking about, what level, but clearly being a leader, having most people I find very successful work their way up through the security. For example, if you're going to become a CFO, you work your way up through accounting, right? You become a certified accountant, and then you work your way up through experience and become a CFO. There are other others who think, no, it works better if you come from the other side and you actually come from a business perspective and come in with some technical knowledge, and then you can benefit by becoming a CISO and a leader. But clearly you need the ability to lead, the ability to have technical conversations, and really the respect of leadership, the ability to talk to the executives, the board, and really be a champion for cybersecurity. I would recommend ISSA has some great CISO training modules. You can take ISSA, you can Google that, CISO mentoring. ISSA CISO mentoring has a whole series of what it takes to be a CISO. And then if you're in government, join the MSISAC, the Multi-State Information Sharing Analysis Center, which is where all the CISOs congregate and work together in government. So strongly encourage that. I want to hand it over to Greg. Another question, Greg. What about cloud security architecture skills, where both technical and business fluency are important? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and technical and business are important in as people move more and more services to cloud environments, and also buying into platform as a service that are offered with by the providers. One of the things we've seen recently is the Spectre and Meltdown. Those were vulnerability or exploits that were essentially focused on the hardware or the firmware that puts up the walls between clients that are using cloud architectures. If those walls come down, or if they're attacked, or if they're breached in any way, then all of a sudden that's an open architecture client to client, and that's a really bad thing. To date, I don't believe there have been actually any successful breaches using that exploit, but what we're seeing is the evolution towards more companies going to cloud architectures because it's cheaper and on-demand services, but also the bad guys are also focusing there too. So this is an up-and-coming field. We're working again with a client or two on what kind of architecture, and from the security standpoint and application deployment architectures, where does that come together for cloud-based computing? Now, if you upload, or if you just transport or put an application into a cloud environment because you don't want to maintain your own computing environment, that's fine. But there could also be security issues in that application that will just get transferred to the cloud, and they'll still be there. But then it all comes down to the authentication and authorization mechanisms on how safe you are. So there's a lot to take into account there. It's a very good question. I don't have a very good answer that's just a one-size-fits-all.
Great. Let's keep moving. It is a great question. You could dive into that for an hour. I've seen whole cloud security architecture sessions on BrightTALK, which you can listen to as well. I want to go back over to Brett. We're getting a lot of questions around what can be done to move into this industry. I want to get in any specific skill sets, any recommendations. So, Brett, you want to try I think we answered that a little bit earlier, but anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so just one point I think I'd make, and that is what's wonderful about this industry is it can leverage a wide range of backgrounds. And I would say some of the more analytical roles, right? We've seen people be successful with, business or, other type of background, math, science. So they can leverage their analytical skills, and then you pair that with some technical education. They can enter into some of these entry-level roles and then decide, would they rather go more of an analytical track, would they rather go more of a technical track. I would say on the technical side, people who are more interested in the penetration testing, who are more interested in the engineering roles, they're probably, it is super helpful to have a network admin, sysadmin, programming background. It's just going to make it easier for them to grasp the knowledge and really build on it, to leverage those assets in a new career. So the good news is you can come from a variety of backgrounds and be successful. It's just how you want to leverage those skills and what roles you want to put them to work.
Great, thanks. We have about 10 minutes left, and we're going to be wrapping up here. I just want to say a couple questions. This is a tough one here, Greg. I'll kind of lead in, but this is, I think we need to answer it. We have an all-white male panel here. Certainly, I think there's a lot of coverage lately around, getting more women in the cybersecurity workforce, certainly getting more minorities in the cybersecurity workforce as well. Referencing a report here from imcybersafe.org about a women's report around getting more women and minorities into cybersecurity, and I know there's been a big push in that, women in cyber, big group here in Michigan around that. Any comments or things you want to mention around that, Greg?
Sure. There is no concerted effort to exclude women and minorities in this field that I know of. I've never heard of it, never seen it. And we've hired a lot of people. We've helped other clients hire a lot of people. It's essentially a numbers game. There is, when people are posting for positions, it's, I think, just like any tech industry, it's male-heavy, or male not dominated, because males don't dominate it. There are just more of them. So then there are, that proportion carries through to who gets hired. There are very successful females, women that I know of in management roles in security. Very successful, minorities too, all across the board. And there isn't, as far as my experience is concerned, any kind of discrimination or anything going on. It's the best person for the job. There are other incentives sometimes to look for minorities, women, that kind of thing, because some government contracts especially are offered to companies that are run by veterans, women, minorities. But as far as I'm concerned, I see this question here, and I don't actually know what mansplaining is, but it sounds like it might be let's make an excuse for the way things are. I'm not making any excuses. We look for the most qualified people.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I want to keep moving. There's tons of...
Can I just jump in really quick?
Brett?
No, just briefly. I mean, I agree with, we do have a heavy demographic in male at the moment. I think what we've tried to do is really look out and see what events and other things that we do to make sure it's more attractive and that women understand and better understand the opportunities and how they can be successful. We've had some wonderful success, at least getting more diverse talent into our classes, which I think makes for an overall program in general, because you get diversity of thought working together in approaching problems. And so from that perspective, I think for us, what we try to do is just really try to work on our messaging and the type of events so that we are attracting a broader population and not just doing things that have been done in the past and just trying to find new ways of attracting the new talent that could help the industry.
Yeah, just to that point, I'll say quickly, in Michigan, I know there's a lot of push to get young ladies involved, minorities involved at a younger age, in school, K through 12, education, a lot of different programs, a lot of different cyber challenges going on around the country, and really concerted efforts to getting them involved, even like middle school, starting earlier and earlier, getting people more interested in general math and science, but specifically trying to get a wider group of people, because as you mentioned, Greg, we have a shortage across the board, so we really need all the above, everybody on board. Couple more questions here. We're going to wrap up here, maybe two more questions and some final thoughts from our panelists, but I'll shoot this one over to Brett quickly. Currently been in InfoSec on an analytics team for 2 years out of school, passed the CISSP and the Security Plus. Considering OSCP, what next steps would you recommend to continue to grow for a person relatively new in the field? Any thoughts you want to give to this individual or others in their kind of similar situation?
Absolutely. So I think clearly the individuals looking for new education opportunities to further their skills, which I believe is right on the money. I think going back to a comment I made earlier, really identifying some mentors in their network and being part of the community, the security community groups that are there locally, all are ways to really expose them to the career possibilities and what resources they need to get there. So you have a lot of companies that are set up to offer different types of education. So the education is part of it, mentoring is another part of it, and then I think community engagement, just really focusing on building their own personal networks in their community will help lead them to the right opportunities and help develop them to be successful.
Okay, one last question here, and then we're going to go to some we're down to 5 minutes left, under 5 minutes, and some final thoughts. I'll give this one to Greg. Your thoughts, would you recommend an info cyber security newbie without practical experience to focus on short-term contract work instead of full-time so they can get more experience? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question because we've been in, this kind of contracting consulting, and I've hired contractors. It can be beneficial, but you got to be careful about pacing yourself as far as don't get in too far over your head too soon. And the contracting world can be very difficult, and it can be very cutthroat because you're a contractor. You're expected to do this job, and if you don't, you're out right away. There's no, or not as much for sure, hand-holding, especially in the beginning stages. The companies go contracting routes sometimes so they can decrease headcount at a moment's notice without worrying about any HR issues. So that can happen pretty easily. So pacing yourself if you're going to do that. Make sure you don't take on something that's too far over your head, but enough so you learn. But also understand if you don't cut it, you're going to be out very quickly.
Okay, we're going to get one maybe 30-second final words of wisdom from both Greg and Brett. I just want to add one quick thing to that point you just made there, Greg. I would encourage any listeners to think about government opportunities as well. I started my career at the National Security Agency, spent 6 years there. I have no regrets. It was a great experience, learned a ton. The culture of security was outstanding, learned a lot of different skills that I used throughout my career later on that paid my way through grad school, got my master's degree. I mean, just a lot of benefits to government. And also, a lot of times maybe they don't pay quite as much, but to your point, is you're really gaining a lot of skills and a lot of abilities and really, being a part of a culture and a team that can really, I think, propel you in your career. So don't just think about short-term money, maybe because you're going to make an extra couple $1,000s a year at a different job, but also think about your career. It's more of a marathon than it is a sprint. And so I know when you're in your 20s and you're looking at your paycheck, a lot of times you want to go for that next job, but think in terms of a marathon and not just will I be ahead at the 2-mile marker. You want to be, you want to run that marathon and be successful all the way through. So think about that. I want to just kind of go back, Brett and Greg, if you could just give us maybe 30 seconds each. We're down to the last 2 minutes here. Any final, recap, any thoughts, and then we're going to be wrapping up here. But any final thoughts you can give on this topic to the audience? I'll start with Brett.
Great. Yeah. No, I think my final thoughts are we need you, right? For those of you who are considering a career in cybersecurity, we absolutely need you. There are paths, there are ways to get in here, and there's a lot of work to be done. I think for those of you who are already in and looking for that talent, right, I think we're all trying to help each other out and build a more secure society in a more secure world ultimately. So the more that we can work together, the more we can accomplish.
Great. And Greg, your final word.
Sure. For getting into the cybersecurity, information security arena, I think we've covered that pretty well. Pace yourself and stay in a job long enough to actually learn something, make yourself valuable before moving on just for a money jump. for recruiting, for people or the security managers trying to look for that talent, or maybe CISOs looking for the managers, or even boards and C-levels looking for CISOs, the understanding the job requirement and not just casting the widest net and getting them, because you're going to get a lot of folks who might not be qualified, as the buzzword bingo on the resume we already talked about, and use the gauntlet interview approach as much as you can, getting the technical, the people with the technical expertise to talk and really plumb the depths of the candidates coming in. And the CISO level has to be a good fit with the culture of the company, or being tasked with changing the culture of the company. A good CISO is going to get skin in the game from his business partners and the businesses he supports to come up with the policies that are going to be best for the business.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone in the audience. Really appreciate your questions. This is going to end our session. You will be getting an opportunity to see this as a tape or recording of our session today. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Dan. Nice job.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Greg.